Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, sponsored by ACR Poker, where this Sunday, July 21st at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, it's the return of the TPE free roll. We are giving away $1,000 cold hard cash courtesy of ACR Poker, which, by the way, if you're not yet playing on ACR Poker, I've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description and you can receive a 100% first-time deposit bonus up to $2,000 just by using the promo code TPE. My name is Clayton Fletcher and I am in fabulous Las Vegas, where things have not been going fabulously, as those who have been listening to our recent episodes can certainly attest. It's not really going much better here entering the final weekend of play at the WSOP. Now, the live tournaments at the Horseshoe are finished, but we still have a few online events, and there are some other things going on around town. So for me, it's just not quite time to go home yet. Matt Stout, our friend, dear friend of mine, friend of the podcast, friend of the TPE Nation, did go pretty deep in the main event. I believe he made the top 300. He received a $60,000 prize for his efforts. Kristen Bicknell, make that Foxen, almost made the final table, and so many of us were rooting for her. She's great on television. She wears her emotions on her sleeve. She has a personality. So many of us were hoping that Chrissy would do the unthinkable and win the whole damn thing. We may talk about her bust-out hand on a future episode because it was kind of a, shall we say, doozy. For my part, I've already started the countdown for next year's World Series of Poker main event. I'm absolutely obsessed with that event. I was very cruelly treated by the cards this summer, but I've said it before and I'll say it again, guys. If you're ever in Vegas during the main event and I'm nowhere to be found, believe me, I'm dead. That's it. I must have died or I would be there for sure. Now, I don't believe in blaming bad luck for everything that goes wrong in poker. Always, there are decisions we should look at. Of course, luck plays a huge role. For example, I am 2 for 7 in significant coin flips this summer, which is not good. But only a fool would blame just variance for his poker results. It's been a rough summer. I think I've played pretty well. In fact, I think I've played better than I've ever played, although the results don't reflect that. As I check my lines using GTO Wizard, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, I've certainly seen some plays that are on the margins, maybe low frequency plays, something the Wizard doesn't do a lot of, but very few key decisions have come up where I've made a play that the Wizard would never ever do. I did manage to make a rare day 2. That was in the $3,000 Mid-Stakes Championship, a brand new event on this summer's World Series of Poker schedule, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about the main event hand that I brought up last week, where I defended my big blind with King 5 offsuit versus a player who just wouldn't stop coughing into my ear all day long. But of course, this hand was from pretty early in the tournament, so suffice it to say that my annoyance level with his coughing fits did not play a factor in any of my decision making. But let's look at that hand and let's use GTO Wizard. Now, this is the best tool available on the marketplace right now for anyone who wants to improve his or her poker game. You can study any spot, whether it's a cash game hand, whether you had 100 big blinds or whether you had 40 big blinds, whether it's a tournament hand where you're in the money and looking at ICM considerations or just looking at chip EV. Just plug in all those details, stack sizes, opponents, flop, turn, and river, and the GTO Wizard does the rest. It will spit out the perfect, theoretical, unexploitable solution for any spot you want. You can also practice playing different spots versus a GTO opponent. See if you can beat the robot. Spoiler alert, you can't. And the other thing I love is you can upload all the hands that you've played that are in your database on your hard drive on your computer, and the wizard will analyze all of your hands and help you find holes, leaks in your game, and help you correct them. If you guys are interested in trying this thing out, it's very easy to use. Just click the link in the description of this podcast and you can receive 24 hours unlimited access to all of GTO Wizard's amazing features. And then after your trial period ends, if you're ready to buy, you'll save 10%. But you have to use the affiliate link in the description, which is gtowizard.com/p/TPE. All right, so let's look at that hand. The blinds were 200 and 300 with a 300 big blind ante. So there's already 800 in the middle. Of course, we have like 50, 60, 70,000. We just have tons and tons of chips. Let's call it 200 big blinds. And the coughing fit guy raised it under the gun to 700. It folded all the way back to me in the big blind with the king of clubs, 5 of spades, and I called. Now, I was very surprised to see this, but the wizard actually doesn't love my play here. It only defends 8% of the time with this hand. So I thought king 5 was at the bottom of my calling range pre-flop, but I didn't know that it probably shouldn't even be in that range versus the under-the-gun raiser. I thought particularly with stacks so deep, and only having one opponent to worry about, I felt like this was an all-day call, but I was wrong, and that's part of the value of this amazing program. It let me know that I've already kind of made a mistake, although the wizard does defend 8%. This is a 92% fold, and I think the next time I'm in this type of situation, especially in a big tournament with really slow blinds, there is none slower than the main event structure, I'll just throw it away and move on to the next hand. But Hero did call 400 more, and the flop came 7-7-6 with 2 clubs. Hero does have the king of clubs. I checked it. Opponent bet 500, and I check raised to 2,000. Opponent made the call. So let's talk about my decision to check raise. The wizard loves it. This is a 100% check raise. So I think it has a lot to do with some of the reasons that I gave last week. Villain should have very few, if any, 7s in his range. Of course, he can have pocket 7s, I suppose, and possibly like ace 7 suited, maybe 7-6 or 8-7 suited some of the time from under the gun. But I think overall, it's just a much, much better flop for me than it is for him range-wise, so I can represent that 7 more effectively than he can. So the wizard loves the check raise. It's usually the sizing I chose. Sometimes it's a little bit smaller and very, very rarely a little bit bigger. But we never call. And interestingly enough, we never fold. So you don't check fold on 7-7-6 with 2 clubs. Not only do we have a nuts advantage, we also have backdoor equity galore. So the turn came to tray of diamonds, which gave me an inside straight draw. And with 5,900 in the middle, I fired out 5,000 and opponent called again. So let's check my line here. And GTO Wizard actually checks this card despite having picked up that straight draw 68% of the time. The sizing that I chose, like 80-some% of the pot, only 5%. And the rest of the time, believe it or not, guys, the GTO Wizard artificial intelligence robot has us overbetting for like 8,000 into 5,900 the other 27% of the time. So we do check 2/3 of the time, but the rest of the time we kind of want to bomb it. And I mean bomb it to the tune of 130% of the pot. And here I thought my bet was big, but no, not big enough apparently. So the opponent called, and then the river came the jack of diamonds. And I remember on last week's episode, I said, this is obviously a give up card for me. You know, I made every effort to win this pot. I check raised on the flop, and then I bombed it on the turn. So if he keeps calling on those two streets, how can I really represent a jack of diamonds helping my hand on the river? It's unlikely that I have a flush. I thought I could possibly bet again to represent that 7, but even there, I mean, how big would you want to bet now that the flush came in? I just don't know. I decided that this was one of my give-up cards, so I checked, and my opponent checked and ends up winning this big pot with the ace-high flush draw that had actually turned a pair of trays on 4th Street. So interestingly, my plan was to bet big again if another club came. So this is part of the hidden luck in poker. I mean, even though I lost some chips on this hand, had that flush come in, I would have represented it, and my opponent actually had it. Now, I have learned in my poker career that one of the best ways to lose a lot of chips is to pretend that you have the hand that your opponent actually has. So, in a sense, I got lucky. But let's see what the wizard would have done on this jack of diamonds. The wizard actually bets 1/3 of the pot 100% of the time on this card. So it's not a mixed strategy. It's just I'm betting. I have check raised, and now I've blasted it on the turn, and now I'm just going to make a little, what looks like a value bet on the river. Now, in real life, if an opponent made that little bet on the river, I would probably see it as a value bet and probably fold, which is why maybe the wizard wants to do it, because it would have worked against me in villain's shoes for sure. But I'm not sure whether this villain would be able to find the hero call, getting 4-1 with just a pair of trays. But I do know that he called a lot of my bets a lot of the time. So I thought that was interesting. I love this program. I love tinkering with GTO Wizard, and I hope that you guys will give it a try. Once again, you want to click the link in the description of this podcast if you want to join the GTO Wizard community. Let's move on to this $3,000 Mid-Stakes Championship. I had a pretty tough table. Maybe that's an understatement. I think I had a really tough table. There was a guy on my left that I thought looked and played like an avatar. He was kind of like a little bit chubby. He had like a beard and a slightly graying salt and pepper haircut. He just reminded me of someone that there would be a cartoon of on ACR Poker or what have you. There was also an old guy that would not shut up. He was probably in his late 60s and just loves poker, was talking about the 2005 main event, the 2009 main event, and making sure to drop 100 million names so that whoever the guy on my left was would be impressed with all the people that he knows in the game and how many good friends that he's had and played in cash games with and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, honestly, I wasn't bothered by him, but I've noticed that some people are at the table trying to get everyone else's respect, and really all I want is their chips. So, I mean, look, if you get respect too, that's great, but given the choice, I'll take the chips any day of the week. The guy on my left, by the way, turned out to be Scott Ball, who I did not recognize, but his name, obviously, I did recognize. And then I remembered that I actually did commentary for a final table that he made several years ago, along with my good friend David Tuckman. So that's a fun fact. I actually played against someone that I have done hours of commentary on and did not immediately recognize, which really is a testament to A, how much poker I've played in the last few years, and B, how similar looking so many of you poker players really are. It's hard for me to tell you guys apart, I'll be honest. You're all a bunch of avatars to me. So I didn't find out till the end of the day. Spoiler alert, we bagged up. I stayed at the same table all day long, and at the end when we finally bagged up, I saw his name when he wrote it on his plastic bag. Which, fun fact, I did not know how to operate the plastic bag because I hadn't seen one all summer long. So let's talk about a hand from the 500, 1,000, 1,000 level. The talkative older gentleman that I mentioned earlier raised to 2,500, so 2.5 big blinds. And then the next player, who was a pretty loose Brazilian guy, he had like some Portuguese writing on his shirt from a sponsor of some kind. So he called. By the way, the Brazilians are coming out in force. Every summer, I feel like I meet more and more Brazilians at the WSOP. Now, the original raiser had about 60,000 in his stack. The caller had 120, the Brazilian guy. The player 2 to my right calls, and I don't know that much about him. He just arrived at our table and just joined the tournament. So he bought in pretty late here on day one. And then on my right, an older player, an amateur. I don't really know what he's doing here. He's got about 80,000 and he calls as well. So it's gone. Raise, call, call, call. And now I am a short stack with 26,000 in my stack, 26 big blinds, an M of just over 10. And I'm on the button with the Queen of Hearts, 10 of Hearts. So what to do with Queen 10 suited facing all of this action? Well, I think that calling is perfectly fine. I mean, I'll be in position after the flop. I have a hand that plays pretty well multi-way, given both its suitedness and connectedness. So calling is fine, but I decided to do something that I talked about on this podcast probably 2 years ago, maybe longer, and it's called the big squeeze. So I'm just all in. Normally when we think of a squeeze, it's like a raise and a call and a shove. But the big squeeze is when a whole lot of people have expressed interest in a pot and you go all in with a hand that doesn't want action anyway. Now, what is the value of this shove by me? Well, I can increase my stack by about 50%, 50% stack increase if no one calls the shove. And if someone does call the shove, well, Queen 10 of Hearts is not a great hand to have, but it's doing pretty well against some of the calling range, like Ace Jack, Pocket Nines. But the real reason to do it, guys, is that my stack size is about 1/2 of the average stack at this point, and this is a spot. This is a plus EV play. If I take it down 66% of the time with no flop, then I break even. If I take it down any more often than that, which I think I actually will, believe it or not, then it shows an immediate profit. But let's talk about the times when I don't get it through and I get called. Usually that will only happen in one place, right? Like maybe the original raiser will have a big hand and go all in, and then I'm going to be usually in trouble, right? He's going to have like ace king, pocket aces, hands that really have me in pretty bad shape a lot of the time. So being called by him is actually kind of the worst case scenario. And even then I can make a straight or a flush and bail myself out of a jam. But really, there comes a time in a tournament when I think we have to take a risk. The risk to reward ratio in this situation is positive. I think I could actually do this with a much worse hand. Maybe even something like 6-4 of hearts would probably be profitable in my opinion. Also, with all of these avatars on my left, I've been relatively tight at this table, not playing my normal style that those of you who've been watching me play tournaments on twitch.tv/ClaytonComic are used to watching me play. I didn't realize it was Scott Ball on my left, but I knew it was somebody that was not going to make my life easy. So because of that, whenever you have really tough, aggressive players on your left, you just kind of have to lock it down and play your hands more decisively. They're not going to let you get away with kind of limping in or making a bunch of cute little stabs at the pot. These guys are going to put you to the test. So I was at a tough table where I did not feel like I had a skill edge. I had a spot where I could increase my stack by 50% if I can just get this shove through. And I had the type of table image that I felt would get a lot of respect for me suddenly going all in after I've been so quiet for well over an hour to an hour and a half. So for all of those reasons, I took my Queen 10 of Hearts, pushed all in, and then started praying to the poker gods that no one would call me. Scott Ball folded his small blind. Ryan Reese, by the way, main event champion Ryan Reese, folded in the big blind. Forgot to even mention that he was at the table. And now the under the gun player, our original raiser, moves all in. Everyone else folds, and I got to see the bad news. What am I up against? He's got an ace queen offsuit. So I think his shove is probably standard, although it might be a little ambitious. I can't really fault the guy for wanting to get heads up with me and not try to play ace queen from out of position against anyone else post flop in a dry side pot. So I like his shove with ace queen. I did not like seeing it in real time because I was totally dominated, but the flop bailed me out. One time out of over 100, you will flop a flush, and it was my time. So boom, 3 hearts on the board, almost had my opponent completely drawing dead. One of those hearts was an ace though, so there were some possible turn cards that could give him life. None of them came, and your boy scooped a nice pot, and my 26,000 stack was now over 65,000 because I got it in really bad with queen 10 suited versus ace queen and got lucky. So it's nice to have a story from one of these bracelet events where I actually got lucky, because it really hasn't happened to me that much this summer. I want you guys to go back, if you're interested, scroll through previous episodes and look for one from a few years ago entitled The Big Squeeze, where I actually talk about this exact play and the conditions that I recommend being in place before one decides to make it. So something like 930 of us made it to day 2, but only 425, I believe, would cash. First place was over $1 million in this tournament, and I showed up on day 2 with just about an average stack, something like 40 big blinds, M of right around 18 or 20. So pretty early on day 2, our table was only 7-handed. The player in second position made it 5,500. The blinds were 1,000 and 2,500 with the 2,500 big blind ante. So there's already 6,000 in the middle. At this point, I had about 140,000 in my stack. So second position at a 7-handed table, he opens to 5,500. The button called, and I was in the big blind with the king of clubs, 9 of spades. And I decided to call. So 3 of us saw the flop. Hero will be out of position with king 9 offsuit. The flop came king of spades, 10 of spades, 8 of spades. And again, we have king 9 with the 9 of spades. So we've got top pair and 9 high flush draw. Also some nebulous straight flush possibilities. And I decide to check to the raiser, who checks, and then the button also checks. So we got to see the turn for free, and that turn was the 6 of spades. Now, I could lead this card, but guys, what can really call me that I can beat? Am I trying to get action from the 7 of spades? From top pair? I really don't know. I just feel like it's a natural check, and the original raiser checked, and now the button bets 8,000 into the pot of like 19,000. So I don't like having another player behind me yet to act, but the original raiser has now passed on 2 different opportunities to bet this board. So I feel like he's kind of checking and checking out. So I call, and the original raiser does in fact fold, and now the river comes the 4 of hearts for a final board of king 10 8 6 all spades, and then a 4 of hearts. Hero with the king of clubs, 9 of spades for the flush. I do not love this spot. The opponent on the button has me covered. I think his bet on the turn is fairly strong. I'm concerned that my 9 of spades is no good, and I checked and hoped that he wouldn't bet. He did check behind, and now I turn my cards over, and my hand is good. I think it's a much more interesting hand, though, if I check and have to face a big bet on the river. Like, what if our opponent bets around the size of the pot, or even 2/3 of the pot? I think it's pretty hard to call with just the 9 of spades, but at the same time, if I don't call with that, then I have basically no bluff catchers whatsoever. I don't know. I might actually run this spot with a big bet on the river using GTO Wizard just to kind of figure out what the calling range should be and at what frequency. But anyway, I won a nice pot there, and I was cruising along for a while, and then something weird happened. The blinds were just still at 1,000, 2,500, 2,500, and out of nowhere, the action folds to the hijack. Kind of annoying French player that was taking too long to act on every street, and he just open shoves 56,500, which is more than 20 big blinds. And I'm on the button with ace queen offsuit, and I just don't know what to do. And in theory, I don't think that there's any hand that should make such a big open. I don't know what to do. So I decided to fold my ace queen, and everyone else folded as well. I wonder whether ace queen suited is a call. I really don't know. What do you guys think about this one? This one was just like kind of perplexing, especially in a tournament where I felt like most of my opponents really knew what they were doing. This was just a very surprising. I mean, the hijack open ripped it for 23 big blinds. So, I don't know. Do with that information what you will. Later on day 2, the blinds had gone up to 1,500 and 3K with a 3K big blind ante, and the action folded all the way around to this little European guy, probably weighed about 112 pounds, very like studious looking, just very small, maybe like 5'6", tiny little skinny dude, and he only had about 40,000, maybe a little less, in his stack. And the action folds to him in the small blind, and he limps in. And now I'm in the big blind with 10 deuce off suit, and I checked it. So the blinds are going to battle, and the flop comes 10-8-4 rainbow, hero with 10 deuce. So I've got top pair, no kicker, and my opponent min bets this flop. Now I decided to raise him. I feel like he should be making this play with a lot of hands, maybe like any pair, any gut shot, or other type of straight draw. I feel like top pair should be good a lot. So I made it 8,500. He had bet 3,000. And then he shoves. Oh, it's here, 36,000. That's how much he had left after having limped in pre-flop. And so now I have a decision with 10 deuce. I don't know, like, why am I in this spot? This sucks. I have 140,000 in my stack, so that's about average for this point in the tournament. And if I lose this pot, I'm going to dip down. But at the same time, do I really want to get outplayed by this little European guy who could have any number of open-enders, double gutters, queen jack for 2 overs and a gutter? So I just don't like folding top pair blind versus blind. So I went with it. I called, and I was almost drawing completely dead. My opponent had 10-4 for top and bottom pair. So I really just needed like runner, like running deuces. Or maybe I could get like another 8 to counterfeit him, and then like some other card to chop. I was in terrible shape, guys, and I lost that pot. All right, let's do one more really quickly here, guys. I start this hand with 130,000. The blinds are 2,000 and 4,000 with a 4,000 big blind ante. So my M is 13, and I've got about 33 big blinds. And I open from late position. I got moved to a new table. I haven't been here for very long. I open from late position with the King of Spades, Queen of Clubs, and I made it 8,000. That seemed to be the typical raise sizing at this table. And also, that gives me a little bit more maneuverability. The shorter we are, the smaller our opening raise sizing ought to be. So I just min-raised to 8,000. The big blind calls. Now I have him covered. He's got about 100,000 in his stack. He is a large man, young, probably late 20s, probably about 100 pounds overweight. He looks very serious. He has very dark sunglasses on, and he seems like he is laser focused and very tense. So that's my player description there. I don't really know much about his playing style, but that is my assessment of his demeanor and appearance. And he's my only caller, so I'll be in position with the King of Spades, Queen of Clubs, and the flop comes Ace of Hearts, Jack of Hearts, 4 of Spades. Hero with Black King Queen, and he checks. I decide to bet very small here. Remember, I had raised to 8,000 pre-flop. I just bet 5,000 into the pot of 22,000. And now my opponent raised to 13,000. So I bet small, he raised small. And I decided to go for a 3-bet here. I'm not really sure what this guy is doing, but I have a huge nuts advantage here. I can have pocket aces. I can have pocket jacks. He probably has like a small flush draw most of the time. He could have like a combo draw with a hand like Queen of Hearts, 10 of Hearts, but I'm not even sure that hand is going to play back at me after I 3-bet, because I'm showing such strength in 3-betting the check raise on this flop. I should have pocket aces, pocket jacks quite a bit of the time. And does he really want to try to get all in versus a set or even 2 pair? Like, what if I have ace jack, right? That's another hand that I can have that my opponent probably should not have at all in his range, because that should be a 3-bet versus a late position open. So with all of that in mind, it felt like a good spot for a 3-bet bluff. And you don't have to go too big here. I made it just 31,000. I give myself some wiggle room. He can call that with his flush draws. I don't really think he's going to shove unless he has maybe one of those really big combo draws, which just doesn't really know what else to do. He immediately goes all in, and I think about it for a few seconds, but obviously I can't really call with just a gutter ball here. So I guess I just blew some of my chips at a brand new table trying to outplay somebody based on a live read. So yeah, I just, tapped the table politely and said, nice hand, and threw mine away. And then he threw his cards at me. The 5 of hearts, deuce of hearts. So he did have a combo draw. It was a flush draw and a straight draw. I don't know if he meant to throw his cards at me or if it was just all that tension that I could feel in his body from the moment I sat down kind of coming out, manifesting itself, and maybe just a little bit wanting to show the new guy at the table that he's not going to be bullied or whatever. You never know what's going on with somebody's ego, but I will say that I think I handled having cards thrown at me with class and aplomb. But in reality, I do think that is the sort of toxic masculinity that prevents so many women from wanting to get involved in poker in the first place. So I went on. There were only 200 players left before we reached the money, by the way. I still had plenty of chips to survive, but eventually things did start to go south on me. And then I was a short stack, maybe a few hours after this, and almost in the money. Less than 500 players remaining with 425 being paid. And I had to take a coin flip. I pushed with like 11 big blinds. I shoved from late position with pocket trays. Got called by the big blind holding the suited king 10. And sure enough, he made a straight with it and sent me packing with no money to show for all of my many hours of hard work. Yet again in the 2024 World Series of Poker. And that'll do it for this episode. Always appreciate those of you who subscribe to the podcast so that it downloads as soon as we release it. That really helps our numbers out a lot. Also, if you guys can leave a 5-star rating or review either on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that also helps out the cause quite a bit. And of course, leave your comments either on Twitter at Clayton Comic or hit me up on the Discord. We have our own Discord, the Tournament Poker Edge Discord. You can join for free by clicking the link in the description. And so, for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, with special thanks, as always, to our very generous sponsor, ACR Poker, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas, please. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Lock in intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no she can't read A little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, if it's not rough, it isn't fun.